So, the floor is now open for anyone who wants to raise their hands and either make a comment or put a question. And please don't hesitate to be unorthodox in your statement. The purpose of a dialogue is that people can say things that have not been said before. Guðni, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was wondering, we've been in discussion and we think that the countries here in Southeast Asia, of course, they have to increase their electricity generation 2 times faster than the growth of the economy. And this means that they will be out of options and they are going for coal. They're going to finish their own coal. They are going to import coal. And at the same, and this is in many cases done to fuel factories that are like aluminium smelters or steel mills using very energy-intensive industries with very little labor, really, so that it's not a question of making jobs. And my question is there a way to somehow take up the dialogue so that these operations could be moved to places like Greenland, which have endless resources of renewable energy? We have in Canada many places. We have in Iceland some resources left, and so on. And around the world, we have about 150 gigawatts of geothermal electricity unharnessed. So I think that if we are going to succeed with the climate mitigation, we have to somehow attack this question very now in the beginning, before the investments are taking place.
Well, I will invite either Ambassador Kim or Mr. Tan to respond to this, or to anybody else who wants to respond. Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. Since Singapore is located in this part of the world, Southeast Asia, so I thought in the spirit of ASEAN solidarity, so I try to answer that question. But in fact, there may not be an answer at all, because it is still a question that is evolving, a challenge that has to be understood by the people living in this part of the world. Well, I think one important point is that maybe there's a lack of the awareness on what's happening in the up north. Because when people use coal energy, it's not because of anything else, it's because it is cheap. When you are in developing countries and you try to develop your economy, and you will want to make sure that you want to minimize your costs, maximize your returns. Of course, like any other countries, people in a developing country will tend to resort to the more, I wouldn't say efficient, but more effective means of energy to propel their growth. This is where I think the conversation and dialogue is needed. Like for example, for the first time in the history, the Arctic Circle Conference is held in Singapore, in this part of the world. And in the throughout today, I'm sure there will be enough awareness, information generated among the participants. And then when these participants disseminate the information back to their own country, and I think you will create a lot of awareness and also generate educations on the importance of using clean energy, renewable energy, in order to make sure that climate change will not become worse, Arctic will not be melted, and everybody in this world will be better off. So I've thought that one way is to, through proliferations of dialogues, conversation like this, to other parts of the region, to encourage awareness. The second point that we can do is, we all know that Iceland is an expert in thermal energy, renewable energy. So maybe those who are very advanced in green technology and renewable energy can partner Singapore or some other countries to go into this area, so as to develop the technology in this part of the world and other parts of the world where they are using coal as a energy source. So that over time, when you have a substitute, reasonable substitute, cheap enough, and then through dialogues like this, Arctic conference, then people will be able to understand the situation, and therefore they will be able to take a bold step going to a new green renewable energy to reduce global warming, to reduce Arctic melting. And as a result, I think it will be a win-win situation for all. Well, I do not have answers to this, but I thought this is the first step that we can do. Thank you.
Ambassador Kim, yeah.
Thank you very much for the question. I cannot give a direct answer to your questions because choice of location for the investment depends on many elements. Electricity and fuel might be one of the factors, but there are many other factors which attracts foreign investment. Korea is at the moment pursuing a creative economy, combining ICT and renewable energies. And we'd like to change our energy mix and reducing coal use and oil use, reducing coal and oil usage, and then moving towards the climate-friendly natural gases. So actually, the location moving to Greenland, we should think of many things. In terms of fuel and electricity, and then it's good, that place is good, but we should think of other factors too. Thank you.
I think this has highlighted an important topic which we have not discussed at this forum, which is how the energy future of Asia will impact on the Arctic. It might be an excellent subject for our next Arctic Circle Forum somewhere in Asia to challenge our friends in different parts of this continent to come together in a discussion, accepting their willingness to cooperate with all of us in preserving the Arctic, of the necessity of, if that is going to be achieved, to transform their energy systems in a fundamental way. I am not aware if that has ever been discussed in that context anywhere. So I think that will be a challenging task for us to undertake. So I think you have given us both the question and the two responses. A very interesting thought to organize our next gathering in Asia, because quite frankly, without a major transformation in the Asian and other European and American energy systems in the next 30 or 40 years, we will still continue to have these huge problems in the Arctic. So the floor is open for any other questions and comments. Yes, Gunnar Bragi.
I have a question. Not to my fellow speakers here, but to the table over there. I'd like to ask maybe Haukur Harðarson from Arctic Green Energy and maybe Guðni Jóhannesson from the Icelandic Energy Institution. Is there a possibility in Singapore and Korea, let's say, to meet the demand of energy from the green energy sector, for example, from geothermal? Can you find geothermal in Singapore and Korea that can be utilized for heating or cooling, or is this a world, space, area and place in the earth that we cannot find it? What options does these countries have, gentlemen? Thank you.
Very good.
Well, people used to tell us that geothermal energy would only work in places like Iceland, which is blessed with a lot of it. And we could do it in Iceland, we could do it maybe in Italy, Philippines, and Indonesia. But surely not in places like China or Singapore or Vietnam, places that have a lot of low temperature geothermal, but not the ultra high geothermal that you find in places like Indonesia. And we have shown that this works in these places, even if they don't have the ultra high temperature that Iceland has. So in China, we are working in about 20 cities where we have proven that replacing coal heating with geothermal heating is cheaper. And so people get the cleaner lifestyle, the healthier lifestyle as a free bonus. Our geothermal energy is cheaper. And whether it can be done in places like Singapore, yes, absolutely. We found out today, me and Guðni, that you have a hot spring here, which is over 100 degrees. People don't know how much geothermal is there, but there is definitely something. Korea, I don't know about yet, but geothermal is everywhere. It's just a matter of how much, how deep, and how hot it is. So yes, we can make a significant contribution to the energy development of Southeast Asia. Guðni?
Yeah, because what I've experienced here in Singapore is that heating would not be your main problem here. But just to add that geothermal heat, when it comes to temperatures up to 100 degrees, can also be, and even lower, can with the technologies that have been developed in the computer data center industry, can be used down to 70 degrees also for cooling, with absorptive cooling. So the dream is to be able to send geothermal water out to buildings, and people can choose whether to use it for cooling or for heating. And then we have a market which will cover the whole world. So that is how we see it in the future.
I must say this is a diplomatic innovation that Icelanders come to Singapore to ask each other questions. But I think it serves the purpose of highlighting what was perplexing to the Prime Minister of Singapore in our meeting yesterday, when I hinted to him that there might be geothermal potentials in Singapore. He thought that was such a strange statement that there could be no base whatsoever. So I hope either tomorrow or in the next few days you will report to the Prime Minister and to the President as well that we should explore this together. It reminds me of my friends in Abu Dhabi. It took me a number of years to convince them that there might be geothermal resources in the desert. And they thought that couldn't really be true because the Almighty had given them the oil and the gas and the sun and everything else. But it turned out, after an Icelandic company did extensive drilling on the outskirts of Abu Dhabi, that the heat level was sufficient to create a cooling system for the building. And let's remember that 40% of the energy requirements in Abu Dhabi is for the air conditioning. So we are not talking about, in warm countries, a small part of the energy needs.
Mr. President,
yes.
Can I respond to
Sure.
your question just now, your point?
Yeah.
That yesterday you indeed had a very fascinating discussion with my Prime Minister. And one of the most fascinating topics was actually to explore the possibility of using thermal energy, geothermal energy, for Singapore's energy consumption. So he thought it may not be possible. But on the other hand, Singapore is a country that is quite different from many other countries. And we always think differently. And we create a lot of things out of nothing. Like for example, our new water, which is a new drinking water, just as clean as distilled water. At the same time, it's created out of nothing. So I thought that in this spirit of innovation and adventurism, there's no stopping from both sides to look into the possibility of trying to extract geothermal energy from the underground. So in that respect, I will encourage our friends from Iceland to talk to our energy agency to explore the possibility of finding geothermal energy in Singapore. And we may not be able to find big sources of geothermal energy to drive the power generator and big factories and so on and so forth. But if we are able to find some way for this geothermal energy to be used to power the air conditioners, computers, and many other house appliances, that would have actually saved quite a lot on the consumptions on the world's energy. And because all these are renewable or energy that can be in abundance or supplies. So actually it will help to make the world cleaner and safer. So I would strongly recommend and encourage a table next door to talk to our energy agencies people. Maybe both sides can come up with something or nothing. Thank you.
There's a question there at the end. I don't know if you have a microphone. Yes, please.
Well, it's a comment, Mr. President.
Can you have the microphone closer to?
Comment, Mr. President. This question has been studied. We've worked on it at the
Excuse me, can I ask you to speak closer to the microphone? Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. President, this has been studied at National University. We have the advantage that Singapore is in fact a geothermal hotspot. You've mentioned the hot spring at Sembawang. That's only 70 degrees, but as you say, we've shown that you can use 70-degree hot water for air conditioning. So the energy is there, there's no question about that. What we need is a borehole going down to 2,000 meters. If I may say so with respect, we have talked to the EMA, the Energy Market Authority, and they're not particularly interested.
Well, thank you for that comment. If I heard you correctly before the microphone was corrected, you said that Singapore was a hotspot. Did I hear that correctly? Yes. That's an additional news for the government. Well, my dear friends, dessert is being served, and we are coming soon to the end of this dinner and the end of the forum, but if there are one or two more questions or comments, I will still have the floor open for anyone who wants to take the... Yeah, please. We need a microphone. Well...
My comment might be a bit idealistic, but I want to say it anyway. And it just seems as we approach this Northern Sea Route situation, it's obviously we have to have the cooperation and the support of the Asian countries. I've been so impressed with your commitment to the Arctic, the work that you've done. And it just seems to me that to put this together in a commercially viable way and to do it in a safe way is going to require the cooperation of Asian nations, some of them who have regional disputes between each other, our North American nations of the United States and Canada who have a dispute with our Russian neighbors now, the nation of Russia, our great European nations. It's going to take us all working together to do it. And my hope is that we can show the rest of the world what we could accomplish if we all work together rather than working against each other.
Well, thank you very much for that statement, and I think that's a proper way to end the dialogue from the floor. And let me just, as we conclude the forum, thank our host in Singapore, both the government and the Maritime Institute for their preparations and the organization of the forum, and I thank the staff and the Secretariat of the Arctic Circle for their diligent work in bringing this together. As some of you might realize, it was quite a challenge to execute the first forum in Asia on the Arctic in this way, and to make sure that it had productive results, informed speakers, and the right spirit of an open dialogue. And I think there is a message in the fact that the people who were primarily responsible for this organization are all very young. I think they send us, all who are in positions of responsibility and older in age, a very important message that the young people of my country and the Arctic Circle and here in Singapore have been primarily responsible, with the support, of course, of the authorities and others, to bring all of us here together. And I want you all to thank them with a great applause and appreciation. And furthermore, I want to thank all the speakers, especially those who have come, as I said before, from the Asian countries, for having presented here today from various perspectives, thoughtful, informative, and insightful contribution to the constructive Arctic dialogue. And I also found it quite fascinating that in the description both from the representative of the Korean Polar Institute and from the China's Polar Institute, that in both countries there is a considerable effort to reach out to young people, to have educational programs, to establish, as we saw when we visited the delegation from Iceland a few days ago, the Polar Institute in Korea, an extraordinary facility for receiving throughout the year thousands and thousands and thousands of students and pupils and young people. And the ambitious plans in Shanghai for a polar theme park to be able to educate millions and millions and millions of Chinese citizens year in and year out of the beauty and the challenges and the nature of the Arctic is a reminder to all of us, also in the Arctic states, that we have not perhaps concentrated enough on reaching out to the young generation and make sure that they can systematically be informed about the Arctic. Because quite frankly, in the school curriculum of all our countries, there is very little about the history, the transformation, and the nature and the complexities of the Arctic or the existing Arctic cooperation. So we needed perhaps to come to a forum in Singapore and to listen to representatives from Korea and China to realize that from their example, the Arctic states can indeed learn a lot. It was at the first assembly of the Arctic Circle that representatives of Singapore expressed the idea that maybe we should organize a meeting in Singapore. At that time, we had not planned in the Arctic Circle to have meetings outside of the annual assemblies. But we thought it was a fascinating idea. And after having thought about it, we started to create the Arctic Circle forums. The first one, as we know, was in Alaska, and this is the second one. And I want to thank all of you for having made it a success in terms of content, the spirit of the dialogue, and the constructive cooperation. To me personally, it has been a fundamental proof that with respect to the Arctic, the global community is so far doing the right thing. There are other areas of the globe where there are confrontations and conflicts and deep problems and divisions. But it's important for the global community to realize that there is a big part of the planet where not only the territorial states, but also leading countries in other parts of the world can come together in a positive, open, trustworthy, and constructive dialogue based on science, knowledge, informed investment, as well as public engagement with respect to the environment and the inhabitants of the planet. And that is a very important example to the rest of the world. It is one of the great positive news that we as human beings, we are capable of doing the right thing, despite the conflicts and the threats. And the Arctic Council has, of course, been an extraordinary example of global success so far, or hopefully will continue to be so. And we in the Arctic Circle and other Arctic forums are, of course, privileged to be able to assist in that work by having the opportunities for anyone who wants to participate in this dialogue to come forward and have their say. That is the democratic spirit and the open invitation that this effort is built on. And here in Singapore, we have all been giving the proof that it is possible. So thank you all for contributing to the success of this forum. Thanks again to our friends in Singapore and others, and thank all of you who have come from many different countries to make this a truly international global landmark. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, President Grusin.